So, bit of a trigger warning for this video. This is going to be a lot more personal and heavy than pretty much any other topic I have covered on this channel. So a bit of a trigger warning. If you are in any way triggered by any of the things shown on screen right now, maybe steer clear of this video. Okay, thank you. When I was young, like really young, I used to have this fascination with space, the world outside of our globe, so infinite that we've barely even seen a fraction of it. I used to watch these documentaries talking about our solar system and the planets that made it up, documentaries about black holes and the sheer colossal size of them. These videos always stuck out to me because while they were just very interesting in their own right, I also couldn't help but feel this intense, unfathomable dread every single time I watched them. There was just something about the sheer size and magnitude of the celestial bodies that made up our solar system and the worlds beyond that deeply, personally frightened me. The feeling of realizing at a very young age that we are but small blips in an incredibly vast and expansive universe, that even our massive planet looks like a pebble by comparison to the likes of a planet such as Jupiter. I experienced a similar feeling of dread the rare times I would go to church. Growing up in a religious household like I did, my family always tried to make sure that I was as close to God as they were when they were my age. But while the Sunday Mass was something that was uplifting and inspiring to those around me, I remember it brought me nothing but terror. The thought of a being so beyond us that at any given point he may return to this earth and pass his divine judgment upon us all, condemning whoever he saw fit to heaven or hell, it was something that kept me up at night. I didn't feel safe in my own world. It felt like all of my actions were being constantly monitored by something so beyond me I couldn't even imagine what it looked like. The thought of a god was terrifying. These two experiences from my childhood affected me very deeply in a way that was incredibly difficult to understand. But as I grew and matured, I realized it was something that a lot of people had also experienced like myself. I became fascinated by the subject of my own fears, that feeling of insignificance in a vast, indifferent world where things so beyond us may very well exist but merely have yet to be discovered. It was through my research of this very topic that I would eventually stumble across the horror subgenre known as cosmic horror. This subgenre, which was popularized by writers such as H.P. Lovecraft, is defined by its ability to encapsulate the feelings I described from my own childhood in works of fiction. It is a type of horror that doesn't rely on commonly used tropes such as jump scares or even an overt threat to scare the audience, but rather a much more simple and primal fear. The fear of the unknown. Cosmic horror preys on this very vulnerable part of our brain that fears what it can't understand. It proposes ideas of the unfathomable, concepts such as beings or entities that exist outside of our reach, but could very well exist and be discovered given enough time and effort. Cosmic horror is meant to instill a sense of existential dread, the likes of which other genres are often unable to accomplish. These stories, when done well, sit in the back of your mind, making you question the very fabric of your reality, and whether or not the subjects discussed, no matter how fictitious they may seem, could truly be plausible. Because to a certain degree, the elements discussed within cosmic horror are real. There are things beyond our Earth, things of such astronomical scale that we are like an atom to them, things that devour planets, stars, even light. And there are things we've yet to even discover. And that is equally as awe-inspiring as it is horrifying. There's a quote from one of my favorite stories, H.P. Lovecraft's Call of Cthulhu, which I think summarizes this feeling perfectly. It goes as follows. The most merciful thing in the world, I think, is the inability of the human mind to correlate all its contents. We live on a placid island of ignorance in the midst of black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far. The sciences, each straining in its own direction, have hitherto harmed us little. But someday the piecing together of disassociated knowledge will open up such terrifying vistas of reality, and of our frightful position therein, that we shall either go mad from the revelation or flee from the deadly light into the peace and safety of a new dark age. This opening quote, as well as the rest of the story, are perfect examples to me of what cosmic horror is. Call of Cthulhu is a story all about the ideas I've discussed, the ambition and curiosity of man, and how our need to learn and discover all there is about the world around us will inevitably be our downfall. The story follows a young man whose granduncle, a linguistic professor, dies of mysterious means. He begins to look through the files and documents written by his granduncle in the years before his death and discovers that he had been doing research on a small bas relief structure that he had never seen before. The structure depicted a being that is now well known in pop culture, a being with the head of a squid, body of a man, and the wings of a dragon. This being, as the author would learn, was named Cthulhu, and the structure his uncle was researching was sculpted by a man who had been inspired to create it by his own vivid nightmares of such a being. He began to look deeper into the phenomena of this thing and would learn that it was not simply one man who had spoken of this Cthulhu, but rather many. Multiple structures of this being were discovered, one of which being praised and worshipped by a cult that believed this Cthulhu to be the one true god who would eventually rise from the depths of the sea when the stars were right once more, so he may rule all of humanity. In regards to this notion, one of the cult members in the story said, quote, "The time would be easy to know, for then mankind would have become as the great old ones, free and wild and beyond good and evil, with laws and morals thrown aside and all men shouting and killing and reveling in joy. Then the liberated old ones would teach them new ways to shout and kill and revel and enjoy themselves, and all the earth would flame with a holocaust of ecstasy and freedom." And it's this quote and the revelation that so deeply compels and terrifies me when discussing the story of Call of Cthulhu. Because to me, this implies that this cosmic being of unknown origin and power who lays restless within our very oceans is waiting for the day that all of humanity goes stark raving mad so he may rise again to conquer our world. There is even a point at the end of the tale where a sailor recounts his experience when he and his crew had stumbled across the ancient temple where Cthulhu slumbers, awakening the great eldritch being by mistake. They were only able to escape by ramming their boat into the old one, after which it returned to the murky depths of its own volition. The time was not right, the stars were not aligned, and humanity still clung to their fleeting sanity. What makes this so terrifying is that if you remember the beginning of the story, it was stated that the discovery of these events and one such being's existence may very well be the catalyst which brings about the madness that will mark his proper return. The very knowledge of something so horrific and beyond us could very well be the thing that will inevitably grant it power over us. Our ignorance is a blessing, and yet we strive to discover everything within the reaches of our known universe, oblivious of the dangers that it may bring us. That is the horror of Call of Cthulhu, an unrelenting universal horror that exposes our deepest fears of the unknown, and the fear that our own curiosity may lead to us discovering something far worse than what our imaginations could ever conjure. This story is a prime example of the existential dread that good cosmic horror is capable of bringing about, because the subjects discussed in it are clearly fictitious in nature, but it still raises a question at the back of my mind. The question of the plausibility of such a being ever being able to exist. A question that will most likely never be answered, but the potential of which will still haunt me for daring to ask it. Another of Lovecraft's creations, Azathoth, highlights a separate and yet equally dreadful element of cosmic horror. This being, often referred to as the blind idiot god, slumbers in the void of space forever, dreaming our very reality into existence. All of our universe, its stars, its planets, us, even beings as beyond us as Cthulhu, are all at the mercy of a being that is completely apathetic to our own existence. Should he wake from his endless dream, all of us, everything that makes our world would cease in an instant, as if they never were. This character and the stories which reference him highlight the horrifying indifference of our galaxy and the potential greater beings and entities that exist within it. Just as a stray comet with no intention or feeling may someday strike our planet, ending life as we know it, this being so beyond our control has that same power. We may view ourselves as beings of great importance for the fact that we're alive at all, for our greater intelligence, but how much does that matter in a greater universe in which we are all but specks of dust that may be destroyed in an instant by all the mysterious outside factors beyond our control? No matter how important we believe ourselves to be, the sun will still one day explode in a glorious supernova. Black holes will still consume any and everything that comes across their path. And if there is a God, he may very well one day send his child to our earth without warning and pass his judgment swiftly and indiscriminately. Just as Call of Cthulhu highlighted the horrors of discovering the truth behind our world, Azathoth explores the horrors of these greater entities' indifference to our own existence, how our own importance is merely self-imposed, and how we as a people are powerless to the cosmic forces around us no matter how much we attempt to counteract them. And those two elements are why these stories resonate and disturb me the way they do. Cosmic horror feels truly like a way to see my own anxieties and fears I have had since a young age contextualized in a way that makes them universally scary. It puts a face to such abstract, primal fears that I have felt all my life. And for that reason, despite the disturbing nature of the genre, I also can't help but feel an odd comfort when I consume it, as if my own fears have been heard and understood. Much like myself, writers and artists have used the genre as a way of expressing their own unnerving thoughts about the greater world around us in a way that can resonate with those they share it with. For these reasons, it, unlike any other genre of fiction, feels incredibly, deeply personal to me. It affects me, fascinates me, frightens me in all the same ways our world and whatever outside of it has done all my life. And that is why cosmic horror is my favorite genre in all of fiction. Thank you very much for watching.